So the moment has finally come. You get your acceptance letter to your dream university in your dream graduate program, but then you see your financial package and there's no financial support. What do you do next? Well, today, we're discussing just that. It's no secret that grad school is expensive, and not being able to get financial support from your graduate program can be almost detrimental and can keep you from getting the graduate education that you really want. And I remember when I got my financial package and it said no support, 1,000 million gajillion thoughts went through my head, but the one that was most pertinent was the one that was constantly in the back of my head saying, you can't afford to go. And so the first thing I did to change getting no financial support to eventually accruing a little over $11,000 from my department is I sent them an email. Yes, I sent an email to my graduate department. And this is because a lot of times when you get a financial package or when departments are parsing out financial packages, they're making arbitrary decisions, or they may have their own internal review that help create criteria to make these decisions. But generally it is without knowing you or the other cohort mates as people individually. And sometimes they just may not understand how much financial need you truly have. Now, it may seem pretty simple to send an email, but oftentimes this is what we refer to as negotiating. And yes, you can do it over the phone, you can do it in person. I did it through email. Now, if you have earned an acceptance letter from other universities that come with financial packages, then that is what we would call leverage. And it is important to make sure you include that information in your email or in your negotiation conversation. And so saying things like, this university was able to offer me this much. Do you have the resources or the capability to give me something comparable? That is a great first step, because you're saying, this university has given me value or given this value to me. Can you match that value? Do you see me as this valuable? Now, if you're like me and you don't have that kind of leverage, then what you need to do in these negotiation conversations is to be explicit about what your financial needs are, what your barriers are to this financial stability, and what your expectations are for them to help you. So for example, within my email, I said, I am coming from out of state. I will be paying higher tuition than my in-state counterparts. I do not have access to generational wealth. And because I've gone from undergrad to master's to university, I've not had the opportunity to obtain a large or substantial savings account to pay for graduate school. And so in addition to the cost of attending, but also relocation fees, I'm just not sure how I would be able to accept this offer. The reason negotiations work, and that you shouldn't be afraid that a university will just reject your offer or rescind your offer, is because universities kind of rank departments based off of how many acceptance letters they send out and how many acceptances of their offers that they receive. And based off of those rankings, they obtain finances, they obtain funding for their department. And so most, if not all departments, if they give you an acceptance letter, they really want you to accept it. Now, just because you're doing these negotiations doesn't actually mean you will get a substantial amount of money. After my negotiations were all done, by the second month of my first quarter at UCLA, the department was able to find me about $11,000, which turned out to be $900 a month. That is not enough money to pay tuition. That is not enough money to pay rent, my car note, just travel, student parking, or any of those things. And so it's important to know that even though you may negotiate and you may be able to get some monies or some funding from that, it may not solve all of your problems. So the next thing that you're going to most likely want to do is look for campus jobs. Now, you shouldn't look for just any campus jobs, but instead look for campus jobs that include tuition. And so if you realize early on that you don't have a funding package, the first place I would reach out to is actually housing to see if graduate RA positions are available. RA ships are amazing job because they not only pay your tuition, but they pay your board. Oftentimes food is included. Oftentimes you get other types of perks that help you as a graduate student survive off of very little funding. Not to mention, a lot of the work that you do will be school friendly or academic friendly because RAs are academic jobs. And graduate RA-ships are a lot less work than undergrad RA-ships because you don't have to worry about things like underage drinking or parties or things like that, because graduate students generally are adults. And at that point, you're kind of serving as like a property manager rather than somebody trying to enforce a lot of student policies. Now, I will say RA-ships at the graduate level are actually super duper competitive, and they really do fill up pretty quickly. So when I reached out, they were not hiring anymore. And so I had to figure something else out. And that's when I started looking at TA-ships and GSR-ships. But that is exactly what I did next. Now, TA-ships and GSR-ships are some of the most popular ways graduate students find a job to pay their tuition and their living expenses. And that was actually the first thing I did. I went and found a TA-ship to help me pay for my grad school education. And from that, I was able to create this video on graduate student researchers and this video about TA-ships that will tell you about the responsibilities, the benefits, but also how to get them. And they'll be in the description box below. But that was my next step, is to find a job on campus that could help me pay tuition while also giving me money on top of that to pay for all my living expenses. Say you do your negotiations and you get your on-campus job that pays tuition, but you still need another little bit of money to just make it through. Well, then your next step is to consider your capacity to either take out student loans or to find a job outside of the campus. I will say first, finding a job outside of the campus is usually frowned upon. In fact, graduate students are supposed to have limitations to how much they're allowed to work. At UCLA, a graduate student's only supposed to work 30 hours per week. However, not many people are going to actually monitor what you are doing outside of the university level, and as long as you're not trying to work full-time or plus hours on campus, you usually can get away with this. Is this ethical? I don't know, but I also don't think it's ethical for graduate schools to accept students that they're not willing to support. And if your dream is to go to graduate school, then you should do what you need to do. And if you have the capacity and the resources to get a good paying job or another job outside of the university setting, I highly suggest it, and I don't think you should feel bad about it at all. I actually didn't know this though, so instead of considering getting a job outside of the university, I took out student loans. And if you're somebody who may not have the capacity to work another job, or if you just don't want to, or don't have the resources to find another job, then these next two videos that will be in the description box talk a lot more about student loans, repayment plans, and most important information to help you make that decision to know if student loans are best for you. And if you find yourself at the edge looking at everything that you'd have to pay for and you decide that graduate school just isn't for you at this moment, I don't think you should feel bad or guilty about this. I do think graduate schools have the responsibility to help their students find finances, and if you don't feel supported or you don't think you have the capacity because of your financial situation, circumstances, or your responsibilities to take out student debt or to work multiple jobs, you are still a valid academic. You still deserve to go to graduate school, and there will be a school out there that will see your value. So if you make this decision to not come back to this university, take that with a grain of salt, because I guarantee if one school will accept you, there are 100 other schools that will accept you, and many of them will fund you. So don't give up. But regardless on what you decide, whether your negotiations go great, your tuition job is enough, or you decide to get an outside job or student loans, this next step is super important and oftentimes not discussed. And that is, you need to be thinking ahead to not just how you're going to fund your first year, but your second, your third, your fourth, and on and on and on. Because the harsh reality is, if they didn't fund you the first time, they're probably not going to have funding for you the second and third and fourth and fifth year. As a result, you need to be searching for grants, fellowships, external, internal grant opportunities to help you fund your second year. Because the second that you enter into campus, grant season starts. Most fellowship applications are due a year before the actual year it needs to fund. So that means if you are a first year thinking about your second year funding, you need to have applications being ready to submit in October, November, and December. Now, of course, there will be some grants that will be available to apply to in March, April, May, February, but those are way less in amount in regards to the grant season, which is usually the fall. So while finding grants are super important, and I do have a video about that that will be in the description, if you are trying to apply to grants and win and earn grant funding your first year, then you should watch this video next, because it is going to discuss all of my grant writing mistakes that have gotten me rejected and how you can fix them in your grant application to create the most competitive application you can your first year. If you found at least 2 things useful, please hit the thumbs up so YouTube will share it with others who might need this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.